Greetings from Costa Rica. My apologies for the delay in getting online today. It's Matt Rosensteel here, aka Costa Rica Matt, as always, bringing you this live chat from Costa Rica today on Thursday, because last Sunday I was sick as a dog and simply didn't want to do anything. Sunday was October 31st, our last episode of the month. So the plan was to do our live Q&A roundup for the month that had passed, and also to cover some news events here that had happened in Costa Rica. So today we're going to go over first a quick, brief Costa Rica news summary for the new month of October. And actually, I'm going to take the moment to talk about some local news and make a quick public safety PSA that I had tried to give at one point. Then we'll get on to viewer questions that had been submitted during October. Questions like asking about the risk of investing in projects that fail. One viewer had asked about where you can get La Croix water, La Croix, La Croix. I've actually only heard it pronounced by people who were sort of joking about the name, so I have no idea what it actually is. But more generally, we'll talk about where you can find those bougie, nice stuff, the great things in the supermarkets that expats might miss when they move to Costa Rica. We'll also talk about how much a nice piece of land might cost in Costa Rica. Someone had asked what I think about Reserva Conchal as an investment opportunity. And finally, someone had asked if there's a publicly available resource for rental occupancy rates. If you're joining me live, don't hesitate to post your questions in the chat. To be honest, my content's going to be pretty brief today without any supplementary questions, so we will probably have time to touch on a few more than just our agenda today. And if you're watching the replay, don't hesitate to leave a question in the comments. We will compile those and go through those in our next live chat at the end of November. Again, my name is Matt Rosensteel. I'm owner-broker of Coldwell Banker Pacific Realty in Guanacaste, Costa Rica. If you're interested in moving here, want to learn more about real estate or the culture or taxes, anything about Costa Rica, I'm usually chatting about something that'll be relevant to you here on my channel. So do be sure to hit that subscribe and notifications button. In just a moment, we'll be right back with our live chat, the news roundup for October 2022, and our Q&A. Thanks for joining and stay tuned. Greetings from Costa Rica, and thanks again for joining. Anyhow, let's get started talking first and foremost about some of Costa Rica's October 2022 news. Honestly, it was tough to find some great joy-bringing headlines to try and share. At the very end of the month, Costa Rica had a nationally recognized tragedy on the other side of the country on the Caribbean. A little boy, only 8 years old, was attacked and killed by a crocodile in a river near Matina. Matina and the entire Caribbean side are different culturally and in a lot of ways than Guanacaste, where I am. But essentially, this little boy was fishing alongside a river. The crocodile, I don't know the details of the incident. Crocodile came and grabbed him, and he passed away. One of the things I wanted to take the opportunity to mention was that because of Costa Rica's stringent wildlife protection laws, and in fact, crocodiles are very much among all of the species that you're not allowed to hunt in Costa Rica, you have seen a very healthy population of reptiles in rivers. Crocodiles commute to and from the ocean on a daily basis to do their hunting out in the water. They come into estuaries as their sort of campground. It's where they meet other partners. They also travel up and down the coast of Costa Rica in order to meet new mates. And so, yes, you may find yourself standing alongside an idyllic Costa Rica river. No, it's not swarming with crocodiles, and there's not going to be an imminent danger everywhere you're standing. But you should keep in mind that this is a country that protects these large species. They've repopulated both coastlines, and rivers can be an important, particularly dangerous place if you plan to go swimming. The boy's family obviously was devastated. He had been there with his parents and 4 brothers. People here love to fish, just standing on the side of the river and throwing in lines. And so obviously that happening was a fairly national tragedy. The government has also been considering what they're going to do with their budget and looking at the issuance of a new round of Eurobonds. President Rodrigo Chavez finance operations and look at how they will maintain liquidity going forward. Costa Rica has issued large rounds of Eurobonds before. There's another round in 2019. But they continue to look for different sources of financing to make the government work. And one of the biggest shocks that came through October, so on November 1st in Costa Rica, your Marchamo is issued, where you can pay for your annual car's insurance. Marchamo, M-A-R-C-H-A-M-O, is a little sticker that goes on your windshield that actually provides insurance for the people in the vehicle should they need health care in the event of an accident. In October, or rather just as November turned around, lots of people here were shocked to find out that Marchamo rates for 2023 had jumped through the roof. Some people had really crazy gaps between what they paid last year and what they paid this year. Some of the differences were over 100%. And that's been a large pill for a lot of people to swallow here, because while it may not seem to be a very large expense to foreigners, it is a significant line item for Costa Ricans. And as we move into the Marchamo payment season, sorry, I'm just now reading John Miller's comment. As we move into the Marchamo paying season, one of the things that will be interesting to see is how the popular appeal to reduce those prices plays out against the government's budgetary needs. We've got very much a government in place that is saying, look, these are the hard choices we have to make, and we're all going to have to pay a lot more. INS, INS, is the entity that issues Marchamo and sets prices for what they need. And I am sure there is going to be huge blowback from the citizenry about Marchamo rates jumping. And I'm also sure, just as every time in Costa Rica, you will see some kind of mediation, and very often the government ends up stepping back and trying to save itself from something that's too wildly unpopular. So we'll watch and see if there are any adjustments to rates to Marchamo. It'll be interesting as the process plays out. Finally, one local news update that I wanted to share. I had wanted to get online for a public safety announcement at one point, but also a local news item here in our own community of Playa Junquial. 2 weeks ago, a Canadian family visiting our area was met with absolute tragedy when the father of the family ended up drowning in the Pacific Ocean, just offshore, not too far from where I'm sitting right now. The reason I want to touch on this, first and foremost, is to try and avoid this happening. Not all beaches in Costa Rica are either safe nor dangerous. And in fact, the same beaches can be safe at one point in the day, and they can be very dangerous at another time of day. I was from Indiana and didn't understand anything about tides before I moved here. There's too low and too high throughout the day, and some swimming spots can be absolutely fine at low tide, but perilous at high tide. Based on my very peripheral knowledge of the circumstances and what was going on, and when I arrived at the beach shortly after the incident, this had been an incident near high tide in conditions of very rough seas. It was a family where a son had gone out swimming. He had been pulled by a riptide, and riptides can happen at any beach here. I think, I'm not an expert, they're more commonly occurring where you've got massive beaches where ocean currents can sort of connect together in the middle and then flow back out. And yes, in certain tides, and definitely right here at Playa Junquial, you can get a riptide. The son was pulled out by a riptide. The father heroically went out to hold him up and save him until two locals from the community could save the son. And the locals were able to save the son. Andres and Jordi from our community deserve an absolute hero's, congratulation and thanks for having saved the son's life and done what they could to save the father. But this was an example where simply not enough knowledge led to a tragedy. There are signs around the beach that indicate, dangerous currents, but there are signs almost at every beach that you would say that show dangerous currents or corrientes peligrosas. So really, what you need to do if you're visiting beaches in Costa Rica and you want to ensure your absolute safety, first, your best tool to not have any issues is going to be knowledge. And you want to get that knowledge from locals who have been in the area 10, 20, 30, even longer numbers of years, who can tell you exactly what is safe and what's not. Because Costa Rica can be very deceiving. I think a lot of tourists here would arrive at a public parking lot. They'd see, all of these Costa Rica sort of like a public park. The setup at the beach would suggest that this is a safe, family-friendly area. And at the right tide, it could absolutely be a safe, family-friendly area. But everybody in the community has an understanding of tides and those dangerous spots. Before you consider getting in the ocean, you should talk to people about what the tides are like in the area. And overall, I rarely would think it's a good idea to swim into the ocean beyond where you can touch. If you're able to, keep your heart and, from jumping out of its cage, and stay closer to shore and stay where your feet are firmly planted on the ground, and really where your feet are planted firmly and the water's average stomach level, because you never know when that larger wave is going to come in and uproot you, and all of a sudden you're being carried out. And unless you're an Olympic swimmer, unless you've got the absolute unbelievable peace of mind to be able to deal with it, a riptide could mean a tragedy for you and your family as well. I don't want to make everybody scared of Costa Rica or the beach or the ocean. I've come close to making errors in the ocean myself, so I'm definitely not perfect. All I can encourage you to do is be abundantly cautious, ask locals about the water, and really limit the distance you go into the ocean to as shallow a water as you're willing to enjoy while you're in Costa Rica. This happens maybe once per year somewhere in our coastline, whether it's Playa Avellanas, Negra, Junquial, sometimes up towards Tamarindo and Langosta, you see it as well. Another important thing I wanted to mention is that there are almost no lifeguards outside of the tourism hubs here in Costa Rica. In the US, you'd have lifeguards pretty much at any beach where you'd see possible swimmers. There are many, dozens, countless beaches here in Costa Rica where the population of tourists and swimmers is not big enough to support a lifeguard. Our tax base here does not support a lifeguard, so you are responsible for your safety at the ocean and really understanding what's going on, because anywhere outside of Tamarindo or outside of Flamingo, these really big tourism hubs, you won't have a public lifeguard watching over you. It's up to you. Do your research. I thought we developed a relationship with this family, and our love goes to them. They're now back in Canada, moving on, and hopefully we'll see over the years that this will stop happening. Yeah, real fun chat today, Matt. That's sorry, I've just been a load of smiles and cheeriness here. Let's get on to the October 2022 Costa Rica Q&A Roundup. First, somebody had asked a very good question that I touched on during the video and wanted to readdress here. The risk of investing in projects that fail in Guanacaste. And this is a very substantial risk because in Guanacaste, there are so many developers who launch a residential community, make huge promises, but their promises are really based on their ability to make, sales, and then they'll be able to build all of that infrastructure, that pool that they had been promising down the line. And really, I think that one of the key points I made in the response on the video, first, this risk has been mitigated a lot, or we're in a different climate now in 2022 than we were in 2008. On the precipice of a major financial crisis in 2009, but also in 2009, Guanacaste had gone through its first major wave of development. And so at that point, your options for purchasing real estate down here were largely unfinished, really raw projects that people had just launched, and you were trying to pick which developer was going to be successful. Well, now 14 years later, there's a long track record, a lot more history to give people the backup information about developers, their success, and the prospects of their project actually coming to fruition. So nowadays, where you might read a million stories that I bought property in Costa Rica 15 years ago, and now it's just a forest, that did happen a lot to people who bought in 2007. Anybody who falls victim to that in 2022 probably has not done their research or really looked at what the developer is doing. By this juncture, their project should either be thoroughly underway or mostly sold. If they're a new project, then they should have a development history in this area that is known to locals, that's known to the attorneys, that's known to realtors in the area. And if it's a fresh project, they should be able to say, yes, these are quality people who can make their project happen. Or you should be able to get those warnings in advance. And it is absolutely always a question of doing your very thorough research and then and actually, I want to put a huge caveat on that. I've met people who feel they do huge amounts of research, that they've gone through every nitty-gritty detail, but the base of their information are all of the pitches that different developers have given them directly as they've toured around looking for real estate. And it always shocks me still. I'll hear from clients, some who've decided to not work with me, or they've found their own project and they're okay. They're just going to make this investment because they've done all the research. But they've essentially just listened to the sales pitch of the developer and said, well, yeah, that all sounds really good. And I can tell by the way these guys operate, I'm going to be okay. That doesn't count as research. You should know which projects they've actually executed before. You should also be able to know what parts of their project they've already sold so far. So for example, you might go through a very raw project and they might say, we've sold lots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way up through 71. You can buy lot 72, but lots 73 through 300 are already sold. There might be only 2 houses in the community and you'll hear this. Oh, we've sold all of this, just 1 lot remaining. You better get yours. Now, I would always look around and say, first of all, why aren't there more homes and projects underway? And second of all, I would ask for the legal information for lot 72, the one that I'm interested in, so that I can review the title and do some preliminary due diligence. When you get the title of a property within a larger project, if you have a skilled realtor working for you, they can go into the National Registry and find all of the titles in that project, and they can actually tell you which ones have sold to a new owner or which ones belong to the original owner. And you can go back and say to that same sales representative, it's interesting, you said all of these lots were sold, but we've only seen title transfer on 6 of those. Do you think I should still feel the same sense of urgency to buy lot 72 from you today? And try and get a better feel for what's going on their actually closed sales. Jason, Shelley Green, and I were looking at Tamarindo Park, a project that was sort of restarting after years of stagnation. And that's one of the very honest questions we had to ask ourselves. How are their sales going? Are they going to make it over the finish line? Or are we going to end up with another 2008 situation? And based on what we know about the developers, based on what we could see in the registry and what we understood about their sales, and very much based on our direct knowledge of who the development team is and who are the people involved, they were able to make a positive decision. So anyhow, as always, do your research. Today, there should be almost zero risk that you have to stomach in investing in a project that might fail. You really, if you're checking your boxes, crossing your T's and dotting your I's, you should be able to reduce that risk to an absolute tiny fraction, if not non-existent. Moving on to number 3, a little bit more of a fun question. Tony, one of my favorite clients and viewers, had seen me drinking a La Croix water, and I might have to get one here soon, and asked where you can get those in Costa Rica. And I wanted to open up the larger question. Where do you find the nicer, bougie, sort of high-end grocery items here in Costa Rica. And this might be one of the biggest cases for moving at least relatively close to somewhere that has a good deal of tourism, because all of those things that please tourists and please foreigners will have been brought to the community and supplied to certain grocery stores. In our area, outside of Tamarindo, there's Automercado. Gosh, I won't even try to think of all of the options. Super Compro, Mega Super, Maxi Poly, which is a Walmart affiliate. 4 large supermarkets outside of Tamarindo and in Villarreal that are all servicing that expat market. And I'm sure in Jaco, there's now an Automercado, and that they have a large Maxi Pali. And I'm sure this is also the case outside of most of the major tourism hubs. You will be able to find pretty much any kind of gringo, or sorry to use that word, any kind of product that you want to find from the US or Canada that has, you're missing from home, those really highfalutin things that you just might not think are here. When I moved here 14 years ago, everyone, even then it was funny, like I couldn't find Heinz ketchup very easily. There was only one supermarket chain that had it. And as someone who can't eat Costa Rican ketchup without getting physically sick, this was a huge priority for me. So basically, when I'd see one of these supermarkets, I'd always be sure to stock up with a few bottles. My host family and Peace Corps made fun of me because I'd go into Santa Cruz, our town, with my bottle of ketchup in my backpack. That's totally changed nowadays. Even I can find Heinz in Costa Rican supermarkets, let alone the huge variety of wonderful products you can find in some of those the supermarkets that cater more to foreigners located outside of tourism hubs or within them. Next, someone had asked, what does a nice piece of land cost? $70,000 is the absolutely quickest answer I can give to that, to boil it down to literally just a price. In our area right now, a nice piece of land can cost you really about $70,000. You can find land with some drawbacks for $40,000 to $50,000 to $60,000, something that might not qualify as nice. But for example, at that $70,000 price point, you can get a very small, actually, I take that back. You can find a quarter-acre lot close to the beach. You could find almost an acre and a half a bit inland. But really, in our current market, I'd say that south of Tamarindo, in our rural area, $70,000 is a number that I'd throw out as to what you could be looking for a piece of land, whether it's one of those smaller home sites closer to the beach or a larger home site inland. And of course, we're talking minimums. You can pay $750,000 for 2.5 acres if it has an insane ocean view. You can pay $250,000 for half an acre if it's within the Hacienda Pinilla. Actually, I take that back. You can pay $350,000 for half an acre if it's within Hacienda Pinilla, one of the area's exclusive gated communities. So obviously, it's a wide open question. You're reaching for anything. But if you're thinking of coming to Costa Rica and you want something that's workable, a property to start out with, I would budget at least $70,000 to come down, pay for a piece of land, pay my costs, and actually get started on a building project. Question number 5. Someone had asked what I think of Reserva Conchal as an investment property. And that's a very interesting question because I was just talking about exclusive gated communities. And one of the dynamics that affects our real estate market is that there are very few of them. It's really hard to set up a gated community in Guanacaste, get your water approvals, environmental approvals, do all of the legal work. It has to bounce between several different ministries back and forth. The process of creating a high-end gated community in our area is horribly long, drawn out. It requires huge investment, and therefore there are only 10 or 15 what I would call high-end gated communities in our area. Reserva Conchal is definitely at the top of those, or in the top 3, depending on your goals. First of all, if you're a golf-related investor, Reserva Conchal might be one of the best places to find a property because they have a spectacular private course. They have an ocean water desal plant, plus all of this wastewater management that keeps the course pristine all year round. But importantly, there aren't a huge number of golf courses either here. We've got Papagayo way further to the north, which is ultra exclusive. I think there's a golf course up around Coco, somewhere in that area. Down where I live, within 2 hours drive of Junquillal, really, there are only the golf courses at Hacienda Pinilla, Reserva Conchal, and I think there's a public one out towards Wacas in another area that I'm not sure about, but there's a scarcity of golf courses as well. Reserva Conchal has a golf course. Second of all, they're owned by this multi-billion-dollar company, FIFCO, Florida Ice and Farm Company, which is the beverage distributor in Costa Rica, or rather, they own the exclusive rights to the 2 most popular beers in Costa Rica. If you can name the 2 most popular beers, first person to do so in the comments will get a high five digitally from me here over the camera. But Florida Ice and Farm owns Reserva Conchal and the full 4,500 acres, I think that they have, some massive piece of property like that. So I feel very overall confident that Reserva Conchal is forever going to be a solid investment because their long-term questions are pretty much all answered. They have one of the most profitable companies in Central America as their owner, and the cash flow behind the beverage business and everything else that Florida Ice and Farm goes to supporting supporting their various business ventures, and you know that you're going to have that stability in ownership. Now, recently, they've been opening up new phases of development, and you can see that the owners are extremely deliberate. They've waited for a hot time in the market, and now they're selling ocean view property and new condos at prices that you would not have seen possible 3 years ago. And it's all because they can perfectly time the market. They're fully in control. They own the property. They have the connections. They have the development. And so to wrap that long-winded spiel up, I do feel very confident that Reserva Conchal represents a solid investment property. The costs of owning there are always going to be high. You've got membership fees to their spectacular beach club. You have your HOA fees within the individual condominium. Obviously, they're going to have assessments to maintain the very high quality of the condos, homes, everything that they've got there. But those costs all go to create one of Guanacaste's true, spectacular oases, a place that feels kind of like Disneyland when you first open the door and look inside. And overall, you can be sure Conchal itself is not going to grow in either direction. It will maintain value, as anybody who wants to move to Costa Rica will have that on their top priorities, or if they have the money to invest there, yes, it will be on their list. Now, can you buy a Conchal condo at the prices that they're selling and wait 2 years and resell it for enough profit to make a good return? I wouldn't think that's a good investment idea whatsoever. Really, currently they're charging that peak absolute top dollar because this is the market. There's more demand than supply. But if you were to acquire a condo or home in Reserva Conchal, it will rent well. You'll have people from all over the world who want to stay there. If you're a good marketer, you could absolutely really get a lot of people coming into your Airbnb property. And among the available options in Guanacaste, if you can afford it, Conchal is likely one of the absolute top picks. Finally, we had a question about whether there is a public resource for rental occupancy rates in Costa Rica. I do not know of one. I was going to say no, there is not, but I shouldn't say so definitively. If you're looking to try and understand the rental market better, occupancy rate data is available through a service called airdna.co. They have some unpaid data that they allow to users, and they have a really huge range of benefits to people who want to pay. And if you want to get into the rental investment market here and you're really thinking about maximizing your income, absolutely a subscription to airdna.co in your respective market where you're thinking of investing would be an awesome idea. In a recent episode, I got on and we were looking a little bit at the comps in our area. It's super easy to use. And what it does is essentially pull Airbnb and VRBO data from all of the profiles available in an area, aggregates it and presents it to you, and you can analyze, toy with it, project. And more than anything, AirDNA can be a tool to, I should really be asking them for some sponsorship or something. It can be a great tool to set your rental rates, to analyze a potential investment, and to really understand occupancy rates. Beyond that, I do not know of a public resource available for occupancy rates here. Finally, I want to make a couple more. I forgot to make one of the biggest Costa Rica news announcements, two subsequently. One is that this Sunday, my son Jonas, now 7, will be in his first tennis tournament. This is going to be friendly. He's been doing lessons. He has a lot of friends through it, and it's been awesome. But it's definitely going to interrupt my Sunday live chat. And it's become very obvious that Sunday at 11 a.m. ends up being a horrible time to do live chats with Costa Rica Matt. So we're going to be rescheduling. I've mentioned this previously. I think we might do Thursdays at noon. It seemed to work out for some people. I'll be posting a poll on my channel in the community page. What time should my new live chat time be? I'm so sorry to pull my viewers here and there and there. It's literally just because I usually make rash decisions and decide to do things without really thinking enough about it before setting a date and time. But anyhow, we won't be live this Sunday so that we can be having fun at tennis. And we'll be at our new time next week. To go back, I see a couple people who have asked about the law 9996. For those of you who aren't familiar with the 9996 law in Costa Rica, it is the law to attract foreigners, tourists, and investors. And by the way, no one mentioned both beers. Only one, Malcolm Marine Ray mentioned. Yeah, you mentioned one. Oh, and the other one, I guess it was you both times. So high five. Thanks very much for hitting both those beers. The two most popular brands are Imperial and Pilsen. And to go back to this law 9996, the honest answer is I haven't heard a peep. And that leads me to 100% believe that nothing has happened so far. This is a situation where no news is not good news. What we're waiting on currently is for the Costa Rica government to implement the system for tax exonerations for people to be able to bring in their trucks, their family goods. This law created all sorts of tax incentives for people to be able to bring stuff down without the import duties. But they just passed the law, and we don't actually have the on-the-ground apparatus for how these duties can be avoided by foreigners. So you really have, aside from the migration requirements and some of the bigger level stuff, a lot of these incentives have not actually taken effect. I will be checking with an attorney on where that law stands, how things are progressing, but since I haven't seen it headlining all of the expat news that finally they've approved the containers and finally they've got the tax incentives, I'm willing to guess here live, and this is just a guess as of Thursday, November 3rd, that we haven't seen any progress, which should not surprise anybody who has watched laws be implemented in Costa Rica before. Thank you very much, as always, for joining me. It's a sincere pleasure. My name is Matt Rosensteel with Coldwell Banker Pacific Realty. If you want to email me, send a note to matt@cbpacificrealty.com. Thanks again, and have a good one.